Israel has said, earlier today that they've already dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza. We're talking, significant levels of destruction. We're talking, while Israel has been known to try and go out of their way to defend their citizens, we're seeing a death toll in Gaza skyrocket. It's already at this point up to about 1,400, many of whom are civilians and children. We're seeing buildings being taken down from these bombs. We're seeing somewhat of an unprecedented level of destruction in Gaza right now. We've heard from Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, talk about wiping Hamas off the face of the planet.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, we've had the Hamas attacks on Israel and the Israeli counteroffensive in Gaza, seeing a lot of people getting killed, hearing a lot of horrific things. Walk us through a little bit about what the status of the fight is right now.
So at this exact moment, we're seeing a little bit of fighting between the Israeli military and Hamas and other terrorist organizations that are based in Gaza. But for the most part, we aren't seeing much skirmishes. We're seeing really mainly Israeli airstrikes into Gaza. Now, Israel has said, earlier today that they've already dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza. We're talking, significant levels of destruction. We're talking, while Israel has been known to try and go out of their way to defend their citizens, we're seeing a death toll in Gaza skyrocket. It's already at this point up to about 1,400, many of whom are civilians and children. We're seeing buildings being taken down from these bombs. We're seeing somewhat of an unprecedented level of destruction in Gaza right now. We've heard from Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, talk about wiping Hamas off the face of the planet. Now we know that they launched this attack this weekend. They overwhelmed the Iron Dome, which is Israel's short-term rocket defense system, and then they also just went right through the fence that divides Gaza and Israel. We saw there were about 1,500 at least militants that crossed into Israel and just went through community by community, slaughtering not just Israeli forces but civilians, women, and children.
Right.
And so Israel is, at a place right now where they want retribution for the 1,000 civilians that were killed, and they're still finding more and more bodies as they go community by community. And so Israel's out for blood, and they will not stop until they don't think Hamas is a threat to them anymore. Hamas has been in power in Gaza for 15 years now, and Israel had been willing to accept a level of risk next to them as long as it, mainly, led to simply rocket fires that they could pretty easily intercept with the Iron Dome. And every once in a while there'd be a heightened of tension. We saw that in 2014. We saw it again in 2021. But this attack, which we've now seen reporting that this was 2 years in the making, has changed the calculus for Israel. We've heard from Israeli leaders.
Now, a dilemma that Israel has always faced when fighting Hamas is that Hamas, their fighters are often located among the civilian population of Gaza. And then the Israelis, when they strike back, then face a lot of criticism over civilian casualties on the Palestinian side. And the Biden administration is, working the phones in the background, trying to sort of calibrate the Israeli response. Talk a little bit about sort of what Israel is trying to do in terms of curtailing the Hamas threat. So
you bring up a good point. One of the fundamental parts of Hamas is that they hide amongst civilians, and they have pretty significant tunnel infrastructure underneath the territory of Gaza, and so that's often where they hide out. That's often where they store weapons. It's often where they use humanitarian aid repurposed for their military objectives. And so when you combine all of these factors, that they're underground, that they're in civilian populations, and we're talking about one of the most densely populated areas in the world. There are about 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza, and it's pretty small of an enclave that's surrounded by Israel, mostly with a little bit of an Egyptian border, and then the Mediterranean Sea. And so Israel really does want to, at this point, get Hamas out of Gaza. But there's still questions of how you can do that without harming the 2.5 million Palestinians that aren't members of Hamas, or aren't interested in terrorism, and just want to live in peace and want the opportunity to for the pursuit of their lives and their choices and their free will.
Now, another country whose name we haven't mentioned yet is Iran. What is the Iranian role in this attack, and what are U.S. officials saying about Iran right now?
That's a great question, and a lot of it is we don't know yet. We've heard conflicting reports from Iran, from Gaza, from Israel, and from the U.S. When you listen to the Western media, they have not yet said Iran was directly behind the planning of this attack. However, they have noted that historically and in recent years, Iran has been a significant backer to Hamas and other terror organizations in the region. So whether or not Iran was involved in the planning of this, they definitely have their fingerprints on it.
Sure.
And so at this exact moment, with Israel reeling and on the verge of starting a ground incursion into Gaza, all eyes are now also on Israel's surrounding neighbors. They face Lebanon to the north, and the main terror group in Lebanon is Hezbollah, which is a lot of experts believe to be a more sophisticated terror organization with more sophisticated capabilities than Hamas. There are also groups in Syria that Israel has already engaged with very limitedly, but to some extent since Saturday's attack. And both Hezbollah and Hamas, as we've talked about, have received funding, training, and support from Iran. And so the question really comes down to whether or not Iran is going to inflame this crisis. And we've heard a number of Biden administration officials, including the president himself, warn other actors not to get involved in this crisis right now. And that warning implicitly and sometimes explicitly is directed to Iran in particular.
What is the United States doing to help?
They're providing Israel with Iron Dome support, whether that's the actual rockets that go in the system that are then fired to intercept rockets. They're also giving them munitions. The U.S. military has moved a naval carrier group into the region. There's discussion about a second naval carrier going into the region as well. And the U.S. has also sent its hostage negotiators to Israel to help with the negotiations with Hamas and other terror organizations, because they, in addition to the killing, took about 100 to 150 people hostage and brought them back to Gaza.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.